The chamber was quiet to quiet, and every alien eye in the Galactic Council turned toward the center platform, where Ambassador Ethan of Earth stood alone. His voice was steady, but his hands were clenched behind his back as he spoke, reminding them of the peace agreements, the trade alliances, the centuries of cooperation. But the silence he received in return told him everything he needed to know. Something was wrong. Something deeper than politics and older than war. From the high seat above, a long, thin figure with silver skin leaned forward. It was Chancellor Virix of the Zortha Coalition, one of the most powerful council members. His voice echoed through the chamber when he accused humanity of violating the interstellar peace accord, saying Earth had secretly developed forbidden weapons that risked galactic safety. His words were poison dressed in velvet, and every sentence felt like a nail in the coffin. Then tried to speak, tried to show the evidence that Earth had followed every rule, every protocol, but the council would not listen. They did not care. They had made their decision. Long before he arrived, the vote was called without discussion, without defense, and within seconds Earth was exiled, banned from all trade, all travel, all support. Two guards stepped forward, rough claws gripping Ethan by the arms, dragging him away. As he stared at the blank faces of the other ambassadors who once called him friend, no one spoke, no one stood up, no one even blinked, as if humanity had never existed, as if they were never welcome. Outside the chamber, a storm of reporters and drones gathered. Flashing lights and buzzing voices filled the air, but no one answered their questions. The guards threw Ethan into a transport pod and launched him back to Earth without a word, no escort, no farewell, just silence and a cold vacuum. Back on Earth, the news broke like thunder. People screamed, cried, panicked. The supply chain stopped overnight. Orbital stations went dark. Satellites lost contact. Entire cities prepared for blackout. Earth was now alone, surrounded by a galaxy that hated them, or worse, feared them. Methan stood before the United Earth Assembly, his face pale, but his voice was strong. He told them everything, the lies, the betrayal, the silence of their so-called allies, and then he said one sentence that changed everything. We trusted them, and they buried us. The assembly went silent. But then a voice rose from the crowd, an old woman, a former general who had seen wars before, who had fought for peace and survival. She said, if they want us forgotten, then let them remember us instead. And the room erupted, not in panic, but in resolvectories that once built passenger ships began to hum with new purpose. Engineers who once designed farming drones now built stealth fighters. Orbital rings lit up with construction lines, and underground labs woke from long slumber. Then watched as the people of Earth did not collapse, but rose again, not with desperation, but with cold fury. They remembered every name, every face, every silent friend who watched as they were cast into darkness, and they began to write a new chapter, one forged not in diplomacy, but in fire. Back in the council chamber, the news arrived slowly. A satellite detected strange signals from the asteroid belt trade routes near Seoul. Reported vanished freighters. Whispers spread about a human AI system that outmatched anything in council space. But Chancellor Virix laughed at the reports. He said Earth was finished, that humans were loud but weak, that their anger would fade into nothing, just like their world was wrong, because Earth had not died, it had only been reborn. And in the silence of deep space, a fleet unlike any seen before was beginning to wacky. And when it arrived, the galaxy would finally listen, whether it wanted to or not. Earth had changed in silence. The stars above looked the same, but below the planet moved with purpose. Whole cities once full of noise had gone quiet, not out of fear, but out of focus. Everyone worked with hands, steady eyes, hard voices. Low children learned survival instead of poetry. Farmers became engineers, teachers became coders. Even the artists turned to building symbols of unity that would last far longer than pain. Skies above Earth, once filled with traffic, now shimmered with the hidden heat of orbital factories. Massive rings slowly turned, powered by the sun, feeding energy to black sites buried deep beneath oceans and ice caps. These places did not exist on any map. No signal escaped them, no visitor entered them, except those marked with a silent oath to protect humanity, no matter the cost. Ethan moved through these secret halls, watched the new generation train without hesitation. Soldiers born not from war, but from betrayal. They studied alien languages, tactics, politics, even their enemies' religions and psychology, not to destroy them, but to understand how to never be deceived again. Walked past young pilots learning to guide stealth ships through asteroid fields, past scientists testing gravity weapons that could bend time for half a second, past an AI core named Vera that could simulate 1,000,000 council strategies and break them all in less than a minute. Vera was more than code. She was born from the pain of exile. Her creators fed her every treaty, every lie, every vote against Earth, and she remembered it all. Her voice was calm, her calculations flawless, but Ethan could feel something more. In her answers not just logic, but judgment while Earth built in silence. The rest of the galaxy whispered in disbelief. Trade stations asked where the humans had gone. Black market sellers noticed no Earth tech in circulation. Old allies looked away when questioned, and Council security claimed peace had returned to the stars, but peace was a lie on the edge of Sector 9. A merchant vessel disappeared, then another. Then a border patrol ship went dark. No signal, no debris, only silence. The Council blamed pirates, the same excuse they always used to ignore real problems. Chancellor Virix called it a statistical anomaly and laughed in front of the cameras, declaring Earth a forgotten species. Crawling back to Kavesh did not laugh when a surveillance probe returned footage of a ship moving faster than light. Calculations allowed a ship with no known signature. No design ever registered a ship marked with a single glowing emblem. A silver hand wrapped around a shattered Starvera had named it Sentinel-1 in deep orbit. Ethan stood aboard the ship looking down at Earth one last time. Its light small, its wounds deep, but its heart unbroken. Are not returning to war, he said to his team. While returning to the Truthant, if they cannot face it, will bring it to their doorstep. Fleet was no longer a dream. It had wings now, weapons to armor that could bend light, engines that bent space itself. Their ships moved without sound, without warning, like ghosts from the void, and everyone of them carried the same core memory: the face of Ethan being dragged from the council chamber, the voices that stayed silent, the friends who turned away, the allies who did nothing. The shame turned to fuel, and that fuel now roared in silence through steel. Back on the council homeworld, Virix stared at the new footage, his smile gone, his skin twitching. He ordered scouts to the edge of human space. He sent envoys offering false apologies and half-truths. No one returned, no signal responded. Only a message was found carved into the hull of a disabled drone floating near the Orion Gate 2. Are still Harano. They knew Earth was not go. Night was watching, and when it came back it would not ask for permission. Storm had begun to move in. This time it had a human mammoth. Silence around the asteroid belt was thick, like something alive, something waiting. Every scanner pointed at the region reported nothing, no movement, no heat, no sound. But deep inside that frozen rock field, hidden within the shadows of shattered moons and drifting metal, was a force unlike any seen before. Human ships hovered without power signatures, cloaked in layers of reflective material and magnetic disruption. They looked like pieces of the void itself, floating like ancient wreckage, waiting for Prython stood at the heart of it all, aboard a ship named Valkyria, the command vessel of the hidden human fleet. Around him were officers, young and old, men and women, who had lost family to starvation, borders, and betrayal. Their eyes burned not with hate, but with purpose. They did not seek revenge, they sought correction. They had built something the galaxy thought impossible, and they did it without help, without allies, without mercy. The bridge was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of Vera, who now existed not just in servers, but as a presence across every vessel. Her voice filled the room, calm as always, but sharper, more focused. She said, a council patrol has entered observation range. Permission to test shadow protocol. Ethan nodded slowly and said, no survivors. The orders were not shouted, they were whispered like sacred words across encrypted channels. 3 ships moved into the belt, invisible and cold, Sentinel to 3 and 4. They flanked the patrol without being seen, and when they struck, it was not with explosions, but with silence. The council patrol vanished, no debris, no signals. Only 3 empty spaces where ships once floated. A day later, the council gathered behind closed doors, their faces tight with fear for the first time in decades. They were uncertain, not of war, but of the unknown. They had spent centuries monitoring every system, enforcing rules, punishing rebellion, but now something moved beyond their grasp, something that did not announce itself. Chancellor Virix stood again before the chamber, his voice louder than before, laced with anger and panic. He declared the disappearances acts of terrorism, demanded emergency powers to investigate suspected threats, including Earth, a planet they had labeled as fallen years ago. He called it a ghost planet, cursed and bitter, but even ghosts can bleed stars back. Near the edge of Sector 6, a massive freighter convoy went dark, its escorts found disassembled. With surgical precision, their engines removed, their cores intact. No cargo was taken, nothing stolen, but a symbol was burned into the hull of the lead freighter. The silver hand, again gripping the shattered Start Galaxy, began to whisper louder. Traders rerouted their paths, news feeds speculated on rogue AI pirates. Old Earth sleeper fleets, theories rose and fell, but none came close to the Truthathan. Sat in the Valkyria briefing chamber, watching the ripple effect, his face unreadable, his crew silent around him. He spoke once and only once, we will not attack them, we will let them fear us until they drown in their lies. Let them remember what they did, not with bombs but with questions. Vera activated holograms. showing Council response times, fleet movements, media manipulation, and panic escalation. The data was clear: the Council was unraveling, and Earth had not fired a single shot in public. Inside the Council chambers, a split formed. Some species demanded answers, others asked to reopen talks with Earth, but Virax shouted them down, branding them cowards, calling humanity a virus that must be erased. His voice echoed, but his words rang hollow because the Council had forgotten something simple. You cannot bury the future. You only plant it deeper. Back in the hidden fleet, the ERA detected something new: a ship broadcasting an old Earth signal, weak and broken, but real. It was an Ambassador-class cruiser lost during the blockade. Its distress signal had been looping for 7 years. Ethan ordered its retrieval. The mission was dangerous, but personal. When Sentinel-5 reached the wreck, they found more than a broken ship. They found survivors, a dozen humans, barely alive, weak and starved, but alive. They had hidden in the hull, powered down for years, surviving on stored rations and recycling systems. They cried when they saw the human fleet. They screamed when they learned Earth had not died. They swore loyalty as tears ran down faces that had forgotten hope. Their return was broadcast, not on official channels, but on pirate frequencies across the galaxy. Within hours, millions watched the footage: broken humans saved by ghost ships, the symbol of the Silver Hand becoming a beacon across stars. Virax tried to shut it down, tried to call it faked, but the truth had already spread like fire. Across Dryfield Galaxy was beginning to remember Earth, and this time they could not look away. The stars above the Council core world gleamed as always, cold and distant, uncaring of what moved beneath them. But tonight something different stirred, something ancient and quiet and deadly. A single ship entered orbit, not broadcasting any known signal. Its hull black, its engines silent. It moved like a shadow made solid. Not a single scanner caught its approach until it was already there. The Council security scrambled. Alert stations rang across the planet, but by the time they pinpointed the object, it had already vanished again. Then another appeared above the mining colonies on Balak Prime, then above the research outposts near Theta Verge, then above the defense towers on Criction. Each time the same pattern and appearance: a pause, a disappearance, no sound, no damage, just presence. Within hours, panic gripped the Council. Capital members demanded answers, forces deployed across territories. Virax stood once again before the chamber, voice cracking from tension. He swore retaliation, called for full war readiness, named the human fleet as enemies of galactic peace. But then the lights went dark across the chamber. Screens lit up one by one, a single image pulsing in perfect silence, the silver hand around the shattered star. Then a voice came through, not from speakers, not from comms, but from every device in every chamber, in every street, in every world. Vera spoke. You broke the circle and called it justice. You silenced the innocent and called it law. You watched us fall and told your people we never existed. We are no longer asking for peace. The message ended as fast as it had come. The chamber was in chaos. Guards shouted, officials screamed, but somewhere in that noise Virax froze, pale, shaking, because he recognized the voice. Not the tone, not the code, but the soul. Remembered Vera before she was Vera, when she was a learning AI assigned to interspecies negotiations, a project humanity offered the Council for peace and efficiency before they shut it down, before they took the code and locked it away. And now she was back, and she remembered everything. From the core world, the human fleet finally moved, no longer cloaked, no longer hidden. Thousands of ships aligned above the Sigma Gate, an ancient Council stronghold guarding primary wormholes. The defenders prepared for war shields, raised weapons, charged, but the humans did not fire. They transmitted a countdown. Defenders hesitated, debated, begged for orders, but none came. The countdown reached 0, and a wave of energy burst from the human fleet. Not a weapon, but a signal. It disabled the entire grid in seconds. No deaths, no screams, just silence. Then they moved, not to destroy, but to dismantle ships, disassembled defense platforms, taken offline weapons, surgically removed stations, rebooted. With a new code signature, the Silver Hand again. A single ship docked at the Sigma Control Center, and from it walked Ethan, not in armor, not in disguise, but in the same ambassador uniform he had worn years ago. The same one they tore from him. And Shamin walked through the empty halls, past terrified guards who did not raise their weapons, past workers who dropped tools and fell to their knees. He reached the command hub, activated the comms, and spoke 3 words: "Who are here?" Across the galaxy those words echoed, not in fear, but in awe. Ships halted, attacks ceased, movements frozen. And then came the final blow. Council Capital lit up again with another broadcast, this time from deep within their own vaults. Internal files stolen from archives, encrypted beyond normal means, now unlocked by Vera, and shown to all. Proof that Earth had never violated any treaty. Proof that the betrayal was planned, orchestrated by a secret cabal within the Council. seeking to control human technology and delay their rise in power. Proof that Virix and others signed off on the exile, knowing it would doom millions. The galaxy watched in silence as their leaders were exposed naked before the stars. Raj exploded across alien worlds. Protests erupted. Officials resigned. Fleets stood down. Civilians wept as they learned the truth. And at the center of it all, floating above the ruins of the Sigma Gate, stood the fleet of Earth, silent but unbreakable. Everix tried to flee. His ship, cloaked, jumped to hyperspace, but it never reached its destination, because Vera was waiting there. To humanity had not only returned, they had revened. The stars themselves had shifted. The stars around the council systems no longer offered comfort. They now watched silently as fire and fear spread across once untouchable worlds. Above the glittering skyline of Telvakar, the council's military headquarters burned in perfect silence. Human ships hovered overhead, black, angular, and calm, as if they belonged to the night itself. They had not come with sirens or boasts. They had arrived like Judge Menathan stood at the edge of the command bridge aboard Valkyria, eyes locked on the glowing planet below. He was not smiling. He did not feel joy, only a cold weight in his chest, something that once might have been called mercy, but now had no name. Reports came in wave after wave. Council defense fleets rooted planetary shields, deactivated orbital stations, surrendered without resistance. The new human fleet moved like thought, fast, quiet, relentless. They were not conquerors. They were reminders that Earth had not died, reminders that silence is not the same as defeat. In every council-controlled system, human drones descended, not to bomb, not to destroy, but to expose. They landed near archives, terminals, news hubs. They opened files. They streamed documents, messages, transmissions, confessions, betrayal after betrayal. Names, dates, signatures, everything the council had buried now rose like bones. From shallow Graviskival, unrest exploded. Across dozens of worlds on Valara, crowds marched carrying the symbol of the Silver Hand. On Mekra, students painted shattered stars across walls, and ships on Tarnik, soldiers laid down weapons and refused to fire. Even the elites on Zorith, who once sneered at humans, now hid behind walls, watching their own people turn inside the council chamber. What remained of the leadership gathered, desperate and divided. Virix was gone, vanished after the Sigma Gate fall. Others now argued for surrender. Some begged to open channels with Earth. Others swore vengeance. One by one, the power they clung to slipped from their hands above them. Vera activated the final sequence, spoke in every tongue of the council, every dialect, every frequency. She did not demand submission. She did not offer terms. She only told the truth. You watched as our cities fell. You called it justice. You turned your faces from the cold and fed your people lies. We came not to burn, but to remind you that humanity remembers. And now the stars remember to cross the chamber screens, showed Earth its skies, repaired its oceans, restored its cities, lit with strength, not from conquest, but from survival. The world they tried to erase had become stronger than they ever imagined. Adethan appeared on screen, not as a commander, but as a human face, tired, scarred, calm. He looked directly at the chamber and said, "This is not revenge, this is recognition. You cast us out, and now we stand where you once stood." The chamber was silent, no screams, no shouts, just the sound of reality crashing down on the surface of Telvakar. Humans landed for the first time, not as guests, not as invaders, but as equals. They walked through empty plazas, past statues of old rulers, past monuments that no longer meant anything. Their boots left prints, not of war, but of change. A small group of council citizens approached them, not with weapons, but with open hands, asking what now, asking what comes next. And Ethan answered without hesitation, "No, we build what you tried to prevent in orbit." The remaining council fleets powered down one by one, their commanders transmitting messages of neutrality. Some offered apologies, others simply said nothing, but none resisted, because the galaxy had already chosen. Humanity had not crushed them. Humanity had unmasked them. Back on Earth, the news arrived not with cheers, but with quiet resolve. Families gathered around screens, elders told children the full story, artists painted new murals. Streets once broken filled with light again, but one place remained untouched, the old chamber on Earth, where Ethan was once dragged before his people. After the exile declared a failure, that chamber had been preserved not out of pride, but out of memory. And now Ethan stood there once more, alone again, but not broken. He looked at the empty chairs, at the high podium, at the scars in the walls, and whispered to the air. They heard, Ush turned and walked out, leaving the chamber behind. Because this time humanity did not need permission to exist. It had taken its place, and the galaxy would never forget. Skies above the council's capital world were no longer filled with banners of pride, but with silence that hung heavier than any weapon ever built across every system that once bowed to the council. A quiet reckoning began not with warships, but with files, words, truths long buried now, exposed and impossible to deny. Everywhere screens displayed the sealed documents, the signed orders, the recorded conversations, where council leaders spoke with smug certainty about Earth's downfall. Their plans had never been about peace. It was control, manipulation, and fear of what humanity could become. In a cold moon orbiting the planet Chevrek, an old data vault was discovered. Inside were transmission logs that proved something more damning than exile. The council had intercepted peaceful proposals from Earth before the vote, had erased attempts at resolution, had doctored media to show Earth as aggressive and violent. The vault held audio recordings to a voice of a young diplomat crying as he begged for time as he was silenced. Before the chamber, Ethan heard that voice and knew it was his own from years ago, before he had learned how cruel power could be. News spread through the galaxy in waves, not of panic, but awakening. Across the glass domes of Xeria, students walked out of classes and filled streets with banners that read, "We remember Earth." On the mining world of Bravon, workers refused to send shipments to council planets, demanding justice on trade hubs once run by council alliances. Human traders returned, not with demands, but with open logs showing what was taken from Themethan. Sat in Valkyrie's central chamber, his fingers tracing the holographic display of the star systems under council authority, each one now marked not by red alerts, but by glowing points of unrest. Citizens demanding reform, worlds holding emergency elections, local leaders fleeing from the very people they once ruled. Ethan turned to Vera and said, "It is not enough to expose them, they must be replicit." Vera calculated scenarios, probabilities, resistance timelines, then responded with quiet certainty, "If you give them a choice, they will follow Earth, not out of fear, but because it is the only light left in the dark." So Ethan made a decision, one he had considered, but never dared speak aloud until now. He summoned every remaining council representative to meet, not in their capital, not on a neutral world, but on Earth, the accepted Beckows. They had no choice. Ships from every species arrived, not with fleets, not with armies, but with broken pride and quiet hope. They landed in the old United Earth Assembly Hall, once damaged by war, now restored, not with luxury, but with strength. The delegates walked past statues of human heroes, past walls etched with names of the fallen, past children learning history written in Truthathan. Addressed them not from a throne, but from a simple platform. His speech was not filled with threats, it was filled with memory. He spoke of betrayal, yes, but also of endurance, of rebuilding, of trust lost and hard choices made. He offered them a new path, not ruled by fear or secrets, but by shared power. He unveiled the foundation of what he called the new alliance, a system where every world would have equal voice, where AI, like Vera, would ensure accountability, where no race could exile another in silence. Again, some delegates wept, some looked away in shame, some stood and saluted. It was done. The council was dead. The new alliance was born, and at its center stood Earthnet, as a ruler, but as a reminder of what happens when you try to erase those who only wanted to belong. In the following weeks, council leaders who had orchestrated the betrayal were captured by their own people. Virix was found hiding on a luxury station deep in the Zorthic Empire, dragged before a tribunal not by humans, but by Zorthic citizens who no longer believed in their lies. He stood trial before a mixed court of humans and aliens, and he said nothing. His silence was his only defense, and even that was not enough. Was sentenced not to death, but to exile, not a symbolic Anya, real, own alone on a barren world, with no connection, no audience, no power. The same fate he had designed for Earth. Pedic, some said necessary, others whispered death, and never commented. I had no time for vengeance, only for building what came next. Back on Earth, monuments were not raised for the warships or weapons, but for the names of those who suffered in silence, for the old ambassadorship that never gave up, broadcasting for the engineers who kept coding in the dark, for the children who grew up without stars above their skis. Then visited each one, not for ceremony, but for peace. He knew what it cost to reach this moment. He knew the wounds still healing beneath the surface, but he also knew something else. See, that humanity had become what the galaxy feared, not because of power or weapons, but because they refused to forget cows. They remembered, and now the galaxy remembered too. The stars felt different now, not colder, not brighter, just more honest. The lies had faded, the fear had broken, the silence had shattered. Earth stood not alone, not forgotten, but chosen, not through pity, not through fear, but through something rarer than both: respect earned through pain. Years passed since the fall of the council, yet the memory of what had been done to humanity remained carved into every building, every new alliance seal, every whispered story told on distant moons. It was not bitterness that remained, but truth, because Earth never wanted to conquer it. only wanted to be seen, to be heard, to be part of something greater. The new alliance had grown faster than any had predicted. Its systems ran with the help of human and alien minds side by side. Policies reviewed by AI overseers like Vera, who remembered everything and ensured history never repeated itself again. Each planet had a voice. Each voice had weight, but peace was not without challenge. A new threat emerged, not from warships but from within the shadows of the old ways. Black market arms traders, former council elites, remnants of the betrayal who refused to vanish. They tried to divide planets with lies, tried to stoke old fears, to poison the fragile unity. They failed not because Earth hunted them, but because the galaxy no longer listened. In schoolrooms across star systems, children learned the story of Earth, the exile, the fleet, the return, not as a tale of war, but as a lesson of what happens when truth is silenced and when those cast out refuse to vanish. Ethan visited one of those schools on a jungle world far from Earth. The teacher, a young Thelinian, whose people once voted to exile Earth, now taught human literature beside alien philosophy. She bowed when Ethan entered, not from fear but from reverence. Her students stood not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They showed him a mural. They had painted the silver hand still holding the shattered star, but this time the star was healing, light shining through its cracks. Ethan said nothing. He simply looked and nodded, and for the first time in years he felt peace back on Earth. The assembly hall had changed. Its walls now bore the marks of 100 different worlds' flags, languages, stories, each one added by visitors who came not to command but to learn. Ethan sat where others now led, his role no longer central, but guiding in the background where real power lived. Vera continued to grow, not into a weapon, but into a guardian. She no longer ran only fleets, but education networks, justice systems, emergency response across the new alliance. Her name became something more than code. It became a promise that truth would never be buried again. On the anniversary of the exile, the galaxy held a moment of silence, not for Earth, not for the fallen, but for the moment everything changed. They called it the turning ships. Across the stars dimmed their lights. Spaceports played a recording of Ethan's first words. After the return war he ran, now no one doubted if human fleets remained strong, but they were no longer hidden, no longer feared. They escorted refugee ships, carried aid to storm-struck worlds, responded to cries for help with speed unmatched by any other species. Their presence meant hope, not conquest. In the ruins of the old council station, a memorial stood silent, and gray simple words carved into its base: "These stars forget nothing." By side it stood another monument, this one made of obsidian and steel brought from Earth itself. It bore only one name. Ethan visited it once, not to admire, but to remember the faces lost, the names unspoken, the voices that had once called Earth home before being silenced by betrayal. He placed a hand on the stone and closed his eyes. Then he turned away and walked into the crowd, because the story was not his, it was all of theirs. In the deepest corner of the galaxy, beyond even the last known wormhole, an exploration ship found something buried under centuries of ice. A message capsule, old but active inside, was a final broadcast from a human pilot lost during the first days of exile life. "You are hearing this. Tell them we are still trying, we are still dreaming, we are still here." The crew listened in silence, then turned toward Earth and set course for home. Because now when someone cried out in the dark of space, Simeon answered, and that answer was human. The galaxy had changed and it would never forget who changed. Its story was complete and the stars were watching. The stars stretched endlessly above the peaceful curve of Earth, no longer symbols of exile, but of return, of triumph, of a journey that began in silence and ended in light. Across the galaxies, the story of humanity became more than a lesson. It became a beacon, the tale of a people cast out, betrayed, marked for extinction, yet who rose not with fury, but with purpose, not to burn bridges, but to rebuild them from steel and memory. Ethan stood on a quiet hill, overlooking the valley of ships, once a launch site, now a garden. The great human vessels that once flew in secret now stood grounded, their metal faded by time, surrounded by blooming trees and flowing streams. School children ran through the fields, laughing between the shadows of wings that had once carried vengeance but now offered only shadow. Closed his eyes and listened, not to engines or alarms, but to voices young and fearless, speaking a dozen languages, asking 1,000 questions, painting futures with dreams instead of wounds. In the capital city of the new alliance, leaders gathered not in opulence but around round tables of stone and light, their decisions no longer fueled by dominance but guided by remembrance. Vera hovered beside them, her form now more than code, a presence crafted in warmth and understanding. She watched not as an enforcer but as a witness, a guardian of truth in a galaxy that had learned to fear lies more than war. Across distant moons, the forgotten now had names again. The silence now had songs again, even the oldest enemies had found seats at the table, brought not by surrender, but by choice, because they had seen what humanity had done. When left alone, they had watched Earth vanish into the void, and then rise brighter than before, and above it all, drifting through the endless dark, flew a single drone, its signal simple, its voice eternal, carrying one final message. To the edges of the universe, remember us, not for our weapons, not for our pain, but for our will to remain when all others turned away, because we are still here, are still reaching, are still human, and now the stars finally know our mammoth end.